Imagine this, a peaceful hospital ship, quietly gliding through the vastness of space. No weapons, no shields, just a medical crew doing what they've done for decades, helping those in need. It's a mobile sanctuary, meant to heal and offer a safe haven to species from every corner of the galaxy. The hospital ship, the Resolute, was humanity's most ambitious project. It wasn't meant for war. It wasn't designed for battles or defense. It was a place of healing. Its mission? To save lives, no matter what species, no matter the cost. It moved from system to system, treating the sick, the wounded, the desperate. It was peaceful, and humanity was proud of it. But the galaxy doesn't understand humans. Not fully. Not yet. You see, there's a reason humanity is still here, still fighting, despite every challenge thrown its way. We're not the easiest species to deal with, and the Galactic Elites were about to learn that lesson the hard way. The Galactic Elites were a collective of powerful, long-established species in the universe, each one dominating its own corner of the galaxy. They controlled vast star systems, advanced technologies, and had the military power to squash anything that threatened their reign. When they looked at humanity, they saw a species that had made its mark on the universe yet still weak in their eyes. They saw a species that had to earn its place, not one that was naturally given respect. In their minds, humans were just lucky to have survived as long as they did. But luck only gets you so far in this galaxy. The elites thought they knew better. The Resolute was nothing more than an easy target, a symbol of what the elites considered humanity's weakness. The elites didn't understand why a peaceful hospital ship was in their way. What could it possibly be protecting? What could such a harmless vessel hold that might pose a threat to their power? They figured it would be a simple mission: show up, intimidate the crew, and leave with nothing more than a couple of medical supplies to trade. No one ever thought the humans would put up a fight. But the elites were wrong. The first signs of trouble came when the Resolute entered the orbit of a previously friendly system. The ship's crew had no idea that the elites, who had already made their way to this corner of space, were stalking their every move. The peaceful nature of the hospital ship made it an easy target, unarmed, unaware, and confident. The elites saw no reason to stop them. After all, what could a group of medics, doctors, and a handful of guards possibly do to stop the most powerful factions in the galaxy? But humanity had a secret that no one had truly realized until that moment. The Resolute wasn't just a hospital ship, it was a symbol of human survival, and humans have an innate ability to survive no matter the odds. They didn't need to have the best weapons or the most powerful ships, they had something else. Resourcefulness, courage, and the willingness to fight for what they believe. When the attack came, it came fast. The elite's ships descended on the Resolute, their weapons blazing. They overwhelmed the ship's defenses, making quick work of what little protection the humans had. Holographic decoys went up, emergency shields flickered, but nothing stopped the advancing elites. The Resolute was under siege, and the crew was in shock. They had no reason to fight. They had no weapons, no armies, and nowhere to run. The elites thought it was over. But the human spirit had other plans. The ship's captain, Elise Moreau, had always been a woman of action, and when the attack began, she wasn't about to cower. She immediately gave orders to the medical staff to get the patients to safety. But it wasn't just the patients she was worried about, it was the crew. The Resolute wasn't built for this kind of confrontation, but Elise knew something that the elites didn't. Humans might not always fight for the right reasons, but when pushed, they fight to survive. And surviving for humans meant doing whatever it takes. John Mace, a seasoned ex-soldier turned head of security, immediately began strategizing. He knew the ship wasn't equipped for warfare, but that didn't matter now. The elites had made a fatal mistake. They assumed that humans were weak, defenseless, and unwilling to fight back. They were about to learn that humans would never go down without a fight, even in the most hopeless of circumstances. As the elites began their attack, there was a strange calm aboard the ship. Despite the chaos, despite the overwhelming force outside, the crew knew one thing: humans don't just survive, they fight back. With quick thinking, Mace and the crew began using every resource they could find, repurposing medical equipment, jamming communications, and utilizing anything they could to make the elites question their decision. And as the ship shuddered under fire, it became clear this wasn't going to be a typical fight. The hospital ship, once seen as a helpless target, was now an unpredictable force of nature. And that's when the real battle began. The moment the alarm sounded, everything on the Resolute changed. The peaceful hum of the ship, once a comforting background to the routine operations of a floating hospital, was now pierced by the harsh, repetitive blare of emergency warnings. "Captain Moreau, we have unidentified ships in the system," the sensor officer said, his voice trembling just enough to betray the situation. Elise Moreau, ever calm under pressure, straightened her posture and turned her gaze to the screen. There, just outside the window of the command deck, the shadowy figures of the Galactic Elites ships filled the viewport. They were sleek, advanced, and utterly intimidating. "No sign of communication?" Elise asked, her voice steady but her mind racing. She already knew the answer. The Elites weren't here to have a chat, they were here to conquer. Or worse, destroy. "None, Captain. They're charging weapons." Elise took a breath. The Resolute was not designed for battle, nor was its crew trained for such a thing. It was a hospital, a sanctuary for those seeking help in a dangerous galaxy. But now, it had been pulled into something far beyond its original purpose. The crew wasn't prepared for an attack. Most of them were medical staff, after all. And the hospital ship wasn't equipped to fend off a galactic invasion. "We're unarmed," John Mace, head of security, said bluntly, his voice carrying a tone of calculated calm. He was standing near the comms station, assessing the situation. His eyes never left the Elite's ships as they closed in. "We won't stay that way for long," Captain Moreau replied with quiet resolve. She was a seasoned leader, having navigated through plenty of tense situations, but nothing had prepared her for this. No one expected humanity's peaceful missions to provoke a force like the Galactic Elites. In the captain's experience, when the Elites made a move, it was never for good reason. This attack would be a test of survival. The Resolute began to tremble as the first blasts hit the hull. The ship's exterior shields flared to life, trying to absorb the impact, but the sheer force of the Elite's weaponry sent vibrations throughout the corridors. Elise's eyes narrowed. They weren't pulling any punches. "Activate the emergency protocols," she ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. Mace, calm as ever, gave a single nod and moved to implement the countermeasures. The ship's systems began to whir and beep in response: magnetic decoys, electromagnetic pulses, anything they could throw at the Elite fleet. "Captain, we have medical patients in critical care on the lower decks," the chief medical officer said, his voice taut with anxiety. Elise turned sharply, meeting his eyes. She knew what he was saying. They had to save those patients before the ship's integrity failed entirely. "Get them to the secure room," she ordered. "Mace, handle the rest. Hold them off for as long as possible." "We're going to need more than decoys to stop them," Mace said, glancing at Elise with a hard stare. He was right. The Elite's technology was far superior. It wasn't just the weapons, it was the speed, the firepower, the sheer overwhelming numbers they had. But humanity had one thing the Elites didn't account for: a relentless drive to survive no matter the odds. Mace reached for his comms and activated the ship's internal defenses, directing the crew to their respective emergency stations. The hospital's security detail had been trained in basic defense tactics, but this was no ordinary situation. The Elites didn't come for peace, they came for dominance. It was self-preservation or nothing. As the blasts kept coming, the hospital ship's hull groaned under the assault, but the emergency systems were working just enough to slow the damage. But time was running out. The Elites were relentless, and there was no telling how long the Resolute's defenses could hold. The initial shock of the attack began to fade into something else. Elise and Mace exchanged a brief look. He knew exactly what she was thinking. There was no running from this. There was no negotiating. They had to fight back. Humanity might not have the biggest ships or the most powerful technology, but what they had was an ability to think on their feet, to adapt. That's where the Elites were wrong. Humans didn't rely on brute force, they used their minds, their ingenuity. "We can't let them board," Elise said, voice firm. "I'm already ahead of you, Captain," Mace replied, pulling up the tactical map. The Elite's attack had a clear pattern. They were striking the ship in waves, hoping to break through its defenses. Mace had seen it before during his time in service. The Elites wanted to finish the job quickly, and it seemed that they were expecting the Resolute to fold under pressure. "Well, they're in for a surprise," Elise muttered, stepping towards the console. "Humanity doesn't break easily." As the Resolute systems hummed in response to the Elite assault, the crew braced for what was coming next. The Elites had begun to make their move, sending in smaller attack crafts to board the ship, while their main vessels pounded the hospital's defenses. Elise's eyes flicked to the monitor as the first set of boarding ships detached from the Elite's flagship. A surge of determination coursed through her. She wasn't going to let them take the Resolute without a fight. Not while she had breath in her lungs, not while there was any hope of holding her ground. "This is it," Mace said, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. "Time to make them regret underestimating us." The countdown had begun. The battle for humanity's survival was only just beginning. But one thing was clear: the Resolute wasn't just a hospital anymore. It had become the front line of humanity's greatest strength, and nothing, not even the Elite's overwhelming power, could stop them now. The Elites underestimated one crucial thing: humans fight differently. While their powerful ships rained destruction on the Resolute, the crew on board wasn't panicking. Captain Elise Moreau and John Mace, the head of security, both knew the odds were stacked against them, but they were determined to turn the tide in any way they could. The Elites had made a fatal error. They thought humanity's strength lay in numbers and firepower. They were wrong. Humanity's strength lay in their willingness to adapt, to improvise, and to fight even when the odds were hopeless. As the alarms continued to blare across the hospital ship, Elise's thoughts raced. The Resolute wasn't equipped for this. Its medical systems weren't designed for war. Holographic decoys, magnetic shields, and emergency lockdowns were all they had. But humans had a remarkable ability to turn even the most dire situations to their advantage. When push came to shove, they could always find a way to survive. The Elites would soon learn this. Elise moved quickly, directing the medical team to evacuate the most vulnerable patients, getting them into the secure zones of the ship. "Make sure we don't lose anyone," she ordered, her voice cool but firm. The medical crew worked in perfect harmony, every movement measured and calculated. They weren't soldiers, but they understood the gravity of the situation. Meanwhile, John Mace took control of the ship's defenses. He had always been a soldier at Hearth, had seen combat up close and personal, back when humanity was fighting wars of their own. He wasn't about to let these elitist invaders take the Resolute without a fight. "Captain, we've got 3 groups of boarding crafts coming in fast. We need to stop them before they hit the internal systems," Mace said, his face a mask of determination. He wasn't fazed by the situation. He was already thinking several steps ahead. Elise nodded, her focus narrowing. She had no illusions about the situation. The Elites had superior technology, faster ships, and more firepower. But humanity had something they didn't: ingenuity and a refusal to surrender. She turned to Mace, her voice steady. "Activate all available countermeasures. We'll keep them out. We can't let them board this ship." John Mace knew the Elites' tactics well. They were methodical, efficient, and ruthlessly determined. They would send in small teams to breach the hull, take the ship's systems offline, and disable its defenses. But the Resolute had something the Elites didn't anticipate: a crew that could adapt on the fly. Mace started pulling up schematics of the ship's internal structure, identifying the weak points and finding ways to reinforce them with whatever they had. They didn't have military-grade weapons, but they had creativity and the element of surprise. "Start locking down the outer airlocks and reinforce bulkhead sections 12 through 16, Mace instructed, his eyes scanning the readouts. "We'll make them regret thinking this is going to be a cakewalk." The first wave of boarding pods hit with a sharp thud against the hull, and the ship's internal alarms screamed to life. Mace didn't flinch. He hit a button, activating the ship's emergency magnetic repulsion fields, which sent the first set of boarding pods tumbling off course. The Elite's boarding attempt had just been thwarted, but it was only temporary. More pods were on the way, and Mace knew they couldn't rely on these small measures forever. Meanwhile, Elise was working with the medical crew to get non-essential personnel to the secure decks. The ship's emergency plans weren't designed for this kind of attack, but she trusted her crew. They were resilient, and they were used to working in high-pressure situations. The Resolute wasn't just a hospital. It was a symbol of humanity's perseverance. Every person on board knew what was at stake. "Captain, we have a problem," one of the medical officers called over the intercom. "The Elites are jamming our communication lines. We can't reach the command center." Elise took a deep breath, her mind racing. She knew that this wasn't just about saving the ship, it was about sending a message to the galaxy. Humans had always been the underdogs, but that didn't mean they couldn't stand tall when the situation demanded it. They'd survived wars, resource shortages, and plagues. Now, they were going to survive this. They always survived. "We don't need comms to win this fight," Elise replied, her voice cold with resolve. We have each other, and we have the will to keep going. We'll make it work. Elise turned to Mace. Get to the secondary shields and reroute the power. We'll need every last ounce of energy to keep them out. Mace was already on it, tapping away at his console and issuing orders to the crew. He knew the elites wouldn't give up easily. They were expecting the Resolute to fold. The moment they realized it wasn't going to be easy, they'd escalate their attack, and Mace was ready. He wasn't about to let the elites win. Not today. The Resolute's crew worked in unison, adapting to the situation as best they could. The ship's non-combatant crew joined forces with the security personnel, learning quickly how to improvise weapons and defenses. The elites, who thought they were facing an easy target, were now encountering something they'd never seen before. Humans who refused to die. As the battle raged on, the elites' first wave began to falter. The Resolute's crew wasn't giving up. They fought with everything they had, from repurposing medical equipment to using advanced ship systems in creative ways. Humans didn't follow the rules, they bent the system to their will. By the time the elite boarding forces finally breached one of the ship's decks, they found the crew waiting for them, prepared, resilient, and determined to defend their home. It wasn't just a battle of weapons, it was a battle of wills, and humanity wasn't about to lose. As Mace watched the elite struggle to get a foothold, he couldn't help but feel a small surge of pride. Humans may have been underestimated, but they were about to prove the galaxy wrong. The Galactic Elites thought they had the upper hand. They had seen humanity before, small, seemingly insignificant, unable to contend with the immense power they commanded. They thought they could easily crush the Resolute under their overwhelming firepower, their advanced weaponry, and their seasoned battle strategies. But they hadn't accounted for one thing: humans don't play by the same rules as everyone else. On board the Resolute, Captain Elise Moreau was already coordinating the counterattack. No, they didn't have the advanced weaponry or ships the elites had, but what they did have was human ingenuity and a refusal to back down. The hospital ship was far from defenseless. It was equipped with the latest tech, hidden deep in the bowels of the ship, designed not for warfare but for emergencies. And now, it was time to turn that tech into humanity's greatest weapon. John, we need to reroute the ship's core to power the emergency weapon systems, Elise said, her voice steady, but her mind racing. The elites were relentless, pushing forward with more precision as they attempted to breach the Resolute. They had already taken control of several decks, their forces infiltrating deeper into the ship. John Mace, the head of security, was already coordinating a response. I'm working on it, Captain. Powering up our internal defenses now. He was tapping commands into his console, his brow furrowed in concentration. They had to act fast. The elites were not just a military force, they were a well-oiled machine, accustomed to crushing anything in their path. But what they didn't realize was that humanity had a weapon the elites had never faced before, the willingness to fight back at all costs. Are the secondary shields online? Elise asked. They're online, Captain, but we can't hold them for long. We need to take the fight to them before they breach the engine room, John replied, his voice low and steady. His tactical mind was already processing the situation. Every second counted. Elise's eyes flicked to the tactical display. The elite's ships were circling, preparing for their next move. Their ships were fast, powerful, and armed to the teeth. But that's not what Elise was worried about. The real threat was the boarding parties, specialized units of elite soldiers trained for shipboarding and sabotage. Once they got inside the ship, it would be a matter of time before they could cripple the Resolute's internal systems. We can't let them reach the engine room, Elise said firmly. Get to the armory. We need every available person to hold off the elites. Mace nodded and began issuing orders to the crew. Every non-essential member of the ship was moved into the secure compartments, while the security team started gathering whatever they could use to fight back. They didn't have standard-issue weapons, but they were creative, and that's where humans thrived. They started repurposing everything on board, using medical equipment, surgical tools, and even light support beams from the ship's underutilized areas to create makeshift weapons. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. Captain, the elites are making their way to Deck 12, one of the crew members reported. Elise turned to Mace. Get there before they do, and don't let them take another step forward. We're not losing this ship. John Mace was already on his way, leading the security detail. As they moved through the corridors, the team worked together with military precision. They had to be fast. The elites were trained soldiers, accustomed to boarding ships and neutralizing their targets quickly. But humans didn't fight like that. They weren't always fast, but they were resourceful. They used the environment to their advantage, knowing that the elites were just as human as anyone else. They reached Deck 12, the first line of defense. The ship's walls shook as the elites' weapons blasted through the outer doors. The boarding pods were now on their way, and the countdown to the breach had begun. "Position!" Mace shouted, signaling his crew to take their places. They used the ship's layout to their advantage, setting up traps using the ship's own systems. The elites weren't expecting this kind of resistance, they were expecting a surrender. The first wave of elite soldiers breached the outer bulkheads, but they weren't prepared for what came next. The humans had hacked the ship's internal systems, rerouting the oxygen supply, shutting off lighting in key sections, and jamming the elites' communications. The first group of elite soldiers, disoriented by the sudden darkness and lack of air, found themselves in a chaotic firefight. The humans weren't using guns, they were using everything around them to create barriers and funnel the enemy into traps. The elite soldiers tried to regroup, but every move they made was countered by a human in the shadows. Mace and his team fought with everything they had, using knives, makeshift firearms, and even hospital equipment to fight back. They weren't professional soldiers, but they were fighters. They were human. Mace and the team fought through the corridors, clearing room after room, as they slowly began to push the elite invaders back. The elites, expecting an easy victory, were now caught in the humans' own game. "Keep moving! Don't let them regroup!" Mace barked, his voice filled with adrenaline. He wasn't just fighting for the Resolute anymore, he was fighting for humanity. Back in the command center, Elise was tracking the progress of the fight. The elites had already suffered heavy casualties, more than they had expected. The Resolute's crew was holding their ground, and every time the elite soldiers thought they were gaining an advantage, the humans found a way to take it back. Elise leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Mace, we've got a surprise for them." Mace grinned as he received the order over his comms. The time had come. The elite's primary weakness was their reliance on brute force overpowering their enemies with raw strength, but humans didn't fight that way. They outsmarted their enemies. They didn't rely on strength, they relied on guile, adaptability, and a stubborn refusal to quit. "We're setting up the final stage, Captain. The elites are about to face the last thing they ever expected," Mace said, determination in his voice. The Resolute wasn't just a hospital anymore. It was a fortress, and it was standing strong against the elite's overwhelming might. The counterattack had begun, and humanity was showing the galaxy what it meant to fight back. The ship was a battlefield. Once a symbol of healing and peace, it had now become a stronghold of resilience and determination. The Galactic Elites, who thought they could easily crush humanity's hospital ship, were finding themselves outmatched, outwitted, and caught in a web of humanity's unpredictability. The Resolute's halls, once quiet and filled with the hum of medical equipment, were now the backdrop for a clash of survival. Mace, with his security team, had fought tooth and nail, holding the boarding parties at bay. The elites had lost their edge, thrown off balance by the creativity of humans who used every part of the ship, every available resource to turn the tables. But the final fight was fast approaching. The elites were not going to back down, they would keep pushing until they had claimed the Resolute as their own. But humanity wasn't about to let that happen. As the last pockets of resistance fought back in the corridors, Captain Elise Moreau stood at the heart of the ship, watching the battle unfold through the live feeds. Every wave of attack was met with defiance, but the elites would soon try their final assault. This would be the last test. They had thrown everything they had at the Resolute, but they hadn't broken it. Humans were more than they could ever understand. "Captain, we've got one more wave coming." Mace's voice crackled over the comms, but Elise had already anticipated that. She wasn't waiting for orders now. She was ready for the final move. Humans were underdogs, sure, but underdogs fight harder than anyone gives them credit for. "We're ready." Elise's tone was calm but unwavering. She had seen what her crew could do. Now it was time to prove it to the galaxy. "Get everyone to their stations. We'll use every last weapon we have, every last resource to stop them. We don't let them win. Not this time." Elise's words rang through the crew's comms. The time for defense was over. It was time for the Resolute to strike back. In every corner of the ship, the crew was preparing for the final fight. The elites had underestimated the crew's resourcefulness. They had thought the humans would fold, that they would cave under pressure. But the elites had no idea how far humans would go when they were pushed to their limit. Mace and his team set up their final defenses, taking positions in the corridors leading to the central control room. The elites would likely make their last push here, trying to overwhelm the Resolute and take control of the ship's systems. But Mace wasn't having it. This was humanity's last stand, and it wasn't one they would lose. "Remember, we fight to survive," Mace said, his voice low but filled with purpose. "This is the last wave. Make it count." As the elite soldiers descended on the ship, they had no idea what was waiting for them. The Resolute had been transformed no longer just a hospital. It had become a fortress, filled with human ingenuity and willpower. The humans, fighting for their lives, were using every tactic at their disposal. They weren't trained soldiers, but they didn't need to be. What they had was something the elites didn't count on: the human drive to fight, to protect what's theirs. The first elite soldiers stormed through the blast doors, expecting the same easy victories they'd had before. But as they stepped into the ship's corridors, they were met with surprising resistance. Every corner of the ship had been turned into a trap, with the crew using the ship's systems and the environment itself to outmaneuver the invaders. Repurposed medical equipment, emergency lockdowns, and even deceptive tactics were used to throw off the elites, keeping them on edge. The battle raged through the ship's halls, with human security teams working in unison. Every time the elites thought they had the upper hand, the humans responded with another countermeasure. The elites' superiority began to crumble. They couldn't keep up with the creative defense being mounted. The humans were fighting smarter, not harder. As the final wave of elites approached the command center, Elise stood at the control panel, watching the screens with a calmness that masked the storm inside. She knew what was at stake. But she also knew that humans had never been an easy species to defeat. No matter what technology the elites threw at them, humans had always found a way to survive. "Mace, it's time. Release the final countermeasure," Elise said. Mace didn't hesitate. The final defense was a last-ditch effort, a massive energy pulse that would disable the elites' ships temporarily, disrupting their ability to fight back. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it would give the Resolute the breathing room it needed to drive the elites off the ship. "Activate in 3, 2, 1. Mace counted down, and the ship's energy systems hummed to life. The pulse hit the elite ships, and for a brief moment they were blinded by the sheer intensity of the burst. The humans didn't waste a second. They attacked with everything they had left. It wasn't just a fight for the Resolute, it was a fight for humanity's place in the galaxy. And the elites had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated the will of humans. The final showdown was intense, with both sides pushing their limits. But in the end, it was the humans who stood victorious. The elites, battered and confused, realized too late that humanity was not an easy target. The Resolute, battered but unbroken, had proven that humans don't just survive, they thrive when pushed to the edge. As the last elite ship retreated, Elise looked over at Mace, who was breathing heavily, his face smeared with dirt but filled with pride. "We did it. We fought, Captain, and we won." The Resolute had survived the attack, and humanity had proven its strength to the galaxy. The elites might have had the technology, the power, and the experience, but they had never understood the true strength of humanity. The final echoes of battle had faded, leaving the Resolute battered but still intact. The elites' ships had retreated, their retreat signaling not just a military loss but the realization that humanity could not be easily crushed. Elise Moreau, standing at the ship's command center, took a deep breath, the weight of the victory settling over her like a heavy cloak. The fight was over, but the war for humanity's place in the galaxy was just beginning. "We held them off," Mace said, his voice thick with the satisfaction of battle won. He stood beside her, his eyes scanning the damage report. The elites' forces had been overwhelming, but in the end, it was humanity's resilience that turned the tide. The Resolute had survived, and its crew had proven something the galaxy would never forget. Humans will never back down. But it wasn't just about winning the battle, it was about what came next. Elise knew the galaxy would be watching, and there was no telling how the elites would respond to their failure. They had underestimated humanity, and that mistake would cost them. The Resolute had shown the elites just how wrong they were about humans, and now the galaxy knew what they were truly up against. "We can't afford to let our guard down," Elise said, her voice firm. "This victory is important, but it's just the beginning. We've made an enemy of the elites, and there's no telling how they'll react, but we've got something they don't, the will to survive." Mace nodded. They might have the firepower, the resources and the numbers, but they don't understand what drives us. They don't understand our spirit, our drive to survive no matter what. As the Resolute drifted through the stars, its crew took stock of the damage. The ship had taken a beating, its systems strained by the relentless assault, but it was still functioning. The hospital ship was still operational, and the crew was still standing strong. Human resilience, not just in terms of strength, but in their ability to adapt, had been on full display. Elites, with their advanced technology and seemingly unshakable power, had underestimated that resilience. The medical crew, working alongside the security teams, began to restore the ship's internal systems. They worked side by side, not just as a team, but as a family, a community of survivors that had faced down the might of the galaxy's most powerful forces and emerged victorious. Their togetherness was their greatest asset. As the Resolute made its way to the next star system, the news of their victory began to spread. Messages were sent to other ships in the fleet, reports were compiled for the higher authorities, and soon word of humanity's strength reached the far corners of the galaxy. Humans had faced down a threat they couldn't have imagined just hours before, and they had come out on top. They had done it not with overwhelming force, but with determination, creativity, and a refusal to be cowed by anyone. But Elise knew the truth. This victory was more than just a military triumph. It was proof that humanity had earned its place among the stars. The elites and the rest of the galaxy had seen that humans were not just survivors, they were warriors in their own right. As the Resolute made its way toward a new mission, Elise took a moment to reflect on the journey ahead. They had faced the elite's might and come out victorious, but they still had so much to prove. The galaxy was vast, and there would be other enemies that would test them in ways they hadn't yet imagined. But one thing was certain: humanity would face them head-on. Elise's gaze softened as she looked out the viewport, the stars stretching ahead of them, infinite and unknown. "We've shown them who we are," she whispered. "But this is just the beginning. Humanity will always stand, no matter the odds." Mace, standing beside her, simply nodded. He didn't need to say anything more. They had done it. They had fought back, and humanity had proven that it could survive anything the galaxy threw its way. As the Resolute sailed forward into the unknown, there was no doubt in Elise's mind humanity had earned its place among the stars, and no one would forget the battle for survival they had fought and won. As the Resolute sails through the stars, its victory a testament to human resilience, the message is clear. Humanity is not just a species of survivors. We are warriors, adaptable, relentless, and always ready to face the impossible. The elites might have underestimated us, but we've shown the galaxy just what we're made of. Now, it's time for you to join us. If you've enjoyed watching humanity rise against impossible odds, then don't stop here. Like this video, subscribe, and share it with others. Let the galaxy know that humanity's spirit is unbreakable, and that we fight with everything we have. You've seen what we're capable of, now it's your turn. Share your thoughts and your ideas in the comments below. Do you think humanity can continue to fight back against the odds? What's next for the Resolute and its crew? We want to hear from you. And hey, don't forget to ring the bell so you don't miss out on the next chapter of our story. You won't want to miss what happens when humanity pushes back against even more galactic threats. Remember, humanity might be small in the grand scale of the galaxy, but we're always ready to fight back. Until next time, stay strong, stay resilient, and keep watching. Because this is just the beginning.